Welcome into our Locked On NBA Insider Report. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Matt George from Locked On King joining us on this NBA holiday of free agency. Lots of things are happening. As far as Sacramento goes, Malik Monk is headed there, signing a 2-year deal. So obviously, Sacramento is very busy with drafting, but now they're adding another kind of key piece here to their roster where Monk really proved himself last year.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this signing. This was a name that I was interested in the Sacramento Kings having interest in going back to last offseason when he signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. But there's the obvious connection between De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk. That was the Kentucky backcourt. So the reuniting of the pair of those guys is pretty exciting and hopefully will lead to a chemistry boost if that's, I guess, necessary for this Kings roster. But Malik Monk brings something to the Kings desperately need at this point, which is shooting. And it's funny because the idea of shooting being a desperation for Sacramento a year ago, we would have laughed at that because Buddy Hield was on this roster, and we know the high volume three-point shooter that he was, and the Kings were not afraid to put up 43s a game. Kings traded away all their good shooters at the trade deadline. Harrison Barnes was the best shooter on this roster. Now you bring in Malik Monk, who helps space the floor with De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, so the signing makes a lot of sense.
Really showing out some of his range as well after Christmas last year, shooting above 40% from three. So that's always helpful. And he can really facilitate. So with some of these younger guys, it's nice to have that a little bit more veteran presence for Sacramento going forward.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he's versatile, so you can use him in different ways. I imagine as of right now, he's the starting two guard, although I think that position is going to be open in training camp. Of course, the Kings could add more to the depth of that position right now, but as of right now, it's Malik Monk, Davion Mitchell, who some believe is going to be the backup point guard. Others believe could compete for the starting two spot. Terrence Davis is still on this roster. He's one of the better shooters on the Kings, but he missed a lot of time with injury last season, so potentially he gets more involved as well. So we'll have to wait and see. Dante DiVincenzo, it sounds like, is on the outs, and I would have pegged him as the front runner to get that starting two guard spot. So you could have Malik start at the two. You could bring him in as a volume shooter and scorer off the bench. It gives Mike Brown options.
It's always good to have options. Now, going forward, where else do you feel like the team is going to make some additions? They have those two new picks from the drafts coming in, obviously. So where else could we see them making moves in terms of adding or subtracting from the roster?
Well, they do have a bit of a logjam in the front court, and I'm disappointed to see that Damian Jones, I think, is going to the Los Angeles Lakers. He will not be returning, and I thought he played very well, and it's a good pickup for the Lakers or whatever team is going to grab him. It sounds like I'm hearing that Richaun Holmes, who I thought was one of the major trade pieces for the Sacramento Kings this offseason, sounds like there's not much of a market for him. However, Mike Brown is a big fan of his, and Richaun is not a bad option to have coming off your bench as a backup big. So we'll have to wait and see with that. But I mean, the Kings, they can't really say no to improving any position at this point. They do have, I'd say, 3 established starting spots, but the depth of this team needs to be improved. The rotation of this team needs to be improved as long as the money makes sense. And we know Sacramento's not exactly a free agency destination. So if the money makes sense and they can bring in a guy that can actually make a solid impact, I guess the word that I would use is moving away from fringe talent and more established rotational talent. That's what Sacramento is going to be looking for, I think, in any position.
Very good. A lot of new faces coming to the Kings, so we'll have to keep an eye on all of that. If you want to check out and learn more, of course, Locked On Kings, wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube as well. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On NBA.